Good morning and welcome to the Tuesday, August 17th, 2021 edition of the National Newspaper Publishers Association's Let It Be Known. This morning, we were scheduled to have a STEM expert, Dr. Mackie, on this morning. However, we have not been able to connect with Dr. Mackie, so we are going to proceed, Dr. Calvin Mackie, I should say. We're going to proceed with our news headlines. And before we get to the news headlines, of course, we introduce the president and CEO of the National Newspaper Publishers Association, Dr. Benjamin F. Chavis Jr. Good morning, Dr. Chavis.
Good morning, Stacey Brown, and appreciate you continue to get up early each morning with the headlines. And on behalf of the National Newspaper Publishers Association, Karen Carter Richards, our distinguished chair and publisher of the Forward Times in Houston, Texas, and the 230 African-American owned newspapers and media companies all over across the United States. We greet everybody. Let's get into the headlines, Stacey.
Yeah, Dr. Chavis, we start this morning in Haiti, a nation ravaged by natural disasters, extreme poverty, and political unrest. Now, the National Hurricane Center issued a most unwelcome forecast for earthquake-ravaged Haiti on Monday. Tropical storm Grace is bearing down on that island nation. It has gained strength over the nearby Dominican Republic and Cuba, and it's now set its sights on the capital of Haiti, Port-au-Prince. The nation continues to assess the death toll and records of a destructive 7.2 magnitude earthquake. Weather forecasters warned that large parts of Haiti could see 10 inches of rain, leading to flooding and deadly mudslides because of the earthquake. At least 1,300 people have died during the quake in Western Haiti, with multiple story buildings immediately collapsing while folks are being pulled from the heaps of rubble in the country's southern peninsula. Dr. Chavis, there are several organizations, including Hope for Haiti and the Global Empowerment Mission, that are taking up donations of all kinds. We urge our viewers to check with the Red Cross and other reputable organizations so that any funds or any items that you might be willing to donate to Haiti will get in the right hands. What a devastating situation there.
It is a devastating situation, and on behalf of the NNPA, we extend our prayers, we extend our support, we extend our concern for our brothers and our sisters in Haiti. Haiti is one of our countries, one of our nations, one of the places where people of African descent have faced so many challenges, but also they've not let those challenges break their spirit. There's an indomitable spirit of the people of Haiti, and we want to do whatever thing we can in the Black press of America to show our support of our Haitian brothers and sisters.
Yeah, and earlier this year, Dr. Chavis, we all know, earlier this summer, I should say, the president of Haiti was assassinated in his home. So there's a lot of uncertainty there, politically and otherwise.
Yes, that's absolutely the truth. And of course, there are a lot of relief agencies. I just heard from NAACP is mobilizing to get supplies also to Haiti. A lot of our organizations that we work with. And of course, throughout the diaspora, I know that the Cubans have sent doctors already to Haiti, as they did at the last earthquake. And we're hoping that responsiveness will come quickly from the Biden-Harris administration so we can get help to the people of Cuba. And keep in mind, the earthquake, the tropical storm that looks like it's almost like a hurricane. And then you also have COVID-19 that is still going on, devastating pandemic. So all these things are converging on Haiti simultaneously. And we have to do everything that we can to extend our help.
Yeah, absolutely. And Dr. Chavis, also President Biden on Monday said that he stands firmly behind his decision to withdraw troops from Afghanistan. He admitted that the Taliban takeover occurred much more rapidly than anticipated. The president said that developments of the past week only reinforced that his decision was the right one. He said he was forced to act because former President Donald Trump had a deal with the Taliban last year that had to be honored. and he believed that America had provided the Afghan political powers and their military every tool to fight for their freedom, but essentially they cowered away from protecting their country. The president said it is wrong to order American troops to step up when Afghanistan's own armed forces would not. And he said the political leaders there were not able to step up for their people now, and they would not have been able to do so in the future. Dr. Chavis, your thoughts on this?
Yes. I believe that how we define what is going on in Haiti is in Haiti, as well as now the situation in Afghanistan, requires the black press to look at these terms. I don't think the Taliban took over Afghanistan. The Taliban has always been there. What happened for 20 years, the Taliban was not, the United States was not able to dislodge the Taliban. The Taliban has been growing every year over the last 20 years. And so they just reemerged. And that's why you notice the Afghan military did not try to defend themselves, because a lot of the people in the Afghan military were also Taliban. I mean, this is just like Vietnam. I mean, I don't think Americans have to learn. You cannot conquer a people, conquer a land, and then make them believe that they're not who they are. I think that the Biden-Harris administration made the right decision to withdraw. It's tragic that the withdrawal happened in the manner in which, the human misery. But I believe that things will eventually settle in Afghanistan, and that hopefully those people that want to leave will be able to leave. The United States controls the airport. You notice that we have all these American soldiers at the airport, but there's no war going on between the American soldiers right now and the Taliban. Why? Because the Taliban decided it was not in their best interest to continue this war either. So I think that let's see what happens, Stacey. And I would caution anyone to rush to judgment on Afghanistan or the people of Afghanistan. I think the United States has some soul searching to do. Every time we go into these wars, we don't seem to have the end game already planned out and the mission objective. So I'm hopeful that, and I know a lot of people families who suffered, who lost loved ones, American families who suffered and lost loved ones in the war in Afghanistan. So I think what President Biden said yesterday took great courage. Most American presidents do not level with the American people. And what we heard yesterday, Stacey, was the President of the United States leveling, being honest with the people of the United States.
Yeah, and Dr. Chavis, you make a great point. And, whether you are a Democrat or Republican, whether you voted for Biden or not, you do have to appreciate the fact that he has been very candid and very open about many situations that he's able to be open about. And so you really have to applaud that, especially considering in that office, the office of the presidency, there's a lot of, if you will, cloak and dagger. You don't really hear the straight shooting that you heard from the president yesterday. You do commend him because he did stand up. He said, hey, I stand by this decision. And we see the pictures coming out of Afghanistan, and they are very troubling. However, you're right, Dr. Chavis. Obviously, America had been there 20 years. And I think about what the president said, and he said that, hey, we trained this military, we set up this government, we help them as much as we can. It's that whole, Dr. Chavis, that the whole give a man a fish or teach him how to fish. And in this case, President Biden is saying they taught Afghanistan how to fish.
Well, absolutely. And also let's remember historically, before the United States spent 20 years there, the Russians were there for 20 years. And the Russians border Afghanistan. They could not conquer. There's still Russian tanks, Russian planes in the deserts of Afghanistan. So no matter, you may have a great military might like the United States or like Russia, but the military might does not ultimately determine the will of the people. You have to understand what is the will of the people of Afghanistan. That's what we need to get in touch with. Just same thing happened in Vietnam. The United States had overwhelming military power, but look what happened. The Vietnamese people would not surrender. And now you have a united Vietnam. There's no more North or South Vietnam. You know, there were people talking about partitioning Afghanistan, North and South Afghanistan, like North and South Korea, or like now North and South Sudan. These partitions of nations without the express will of the people involved in the partition does not work. And so the United States needs to learn from history, not repeat history.
Yeah, absolutely. And today, this morning, I should say, is a perfect time for many in our viewing audience to send us some questions. Our scheduled guest, Dr. Calvin Mackie, apparently there are some communication problems there. We are not able to get him, but we do have this morning to talk more about the headlines with us is Washington Informer reporter James Wright, who has been covering many of these issues we're talking about. We want to say good morning to James Wright.
Good morning.
James.
Good morning, Brother Wright. We appreciate all of what you do for the Black Press of America.
Thank you, sir. Good morning, Dr. Chavis. Always great to see you and talk to you. And of course, my colleague, Stacey Brown at the Washington Informer. I do want to say, Dr. Chavis, what you just said about Afghanistan is absolutely right. I spent 2 weeks when I was with the Afro-American newspaper. I spent 2 weeks in Afghanistan. And I stayed mainly in Kabul, but I traveled to other areas. And let me tell you something, and I will be very blunt about this. The Afghan people don't like Americans. I would see many instances where, well, particularly white Americans, and when they would be around white Americans and they would smile in their face, but the minute the white American would turn around, they would just make these disgusting looks at them. So the fact that the Taliban has taken over so quickly doesn't surprise me any, because they just don't like Americans. And you made an excellent point in reference to history. I mean, you talked about the Russian invasion of Afghanistan in 1980, and the Russians couldn't do anything with them. But sir, you also remember the British Empire couldn't do anything with them. And even way back in the 1200s, Genghis Khan tried to conquer them, and he couldn't do anything with them. So these are very strong people. Now, this is a very poor country, but these are very strong people, and they will fight you. They will literally fight you. So President Biden did the right thing. Get out of Afghanistan. They don't want us there.
and you know, James, you make a great point at that last punctuation mark. They don't want us there. James, when you covered, other than seeing that the dislike for Americans, what else stood out for you in Kabul, in Afghanistan, that you realized that perhaps people at home don't really understand?
They don't understand. This is going to sound kind of convoluted, Stacey, but let me try to explain it to you this way. Afghanistan is not a Western country. It's not a Western country. They have different ways of looking at things. For example, I'll have to say this with women. The Taliban is an extreme example of that, but they just have different views about what a woman does in society. And that does not line up with what Western views are, and they're evolving, but it is not a Western country, so they don't have Western views. Plus, keep in mind that Afghanistan is a poor country. It is poor. People talk about African nations being poor. I would even say most African nations would be wealthy, even the poorest African nation compared to Afghanistan. Those folks are dirt poor. If you ever went to Kabul, and I spent 2 weeks in Kabul, Kabul looks like bedrock on the Flintstones. It is a poor country. And if you go out into the countryside, you swear you're back into like the 1700s. I mean, these are some poor people, barely having running water. And I mean, barely having running water. It's a poor country. People don't know that. It's not modern in that sense. and it is not a Western country. They don't embrace Western values.
Yeah, and you mentioned poor country. Reports were that the president of Afghanistan fled with 4 high-end vehicles, a helicopter that was so full of cash that they had to leave some of it behind. Bobby Henry's down in Fort Lauderdale, Florida. Now he could be talking about either or both Haiti and Afghanistan. He says maybe this is an opportunity to help. Yeah, he's talking about Haiti. Maybe this is an opportunity to help Haiti and rebuilding that country with love instead of hate. Mm-hmm. And I want to go back to that to Dr. Chavis Haiti situation, and Bobby brings up a great point. Rebuilding that country with love instead of hate. Never know what what Bobby really means about something until he explains it to you personally, but I want you to dissect what Bobby's trying to convey here, Dr. Chavis.
Well, I think our publisher, Bobby Henry, one of the leaders of the NNPA, is right on point. The West Side Gazette, that whole South Florida, particularly in Fort Lauderdale, there's a very large Haitian community, very dedicated, very smart, very intelligent brothers and sisters who make a tremendous contribution to the United States. There's a large Haitian population that sometimes doesn't get the uplift, doesn't get the embrace that they should give. Keep in mind, Haiti brought democracy, brought independence to the Western Hemisphere even before the United States. So I think that the French have a lot to repair in terms of reparations, because that's why the Haitians still speak French today. They were colonized by the French. And of course, Sunshine Overture helped to overturn the domination of France to Haiti. And even today, as poor as Haiti is, they still have to pay reparations back to France. That's wrong. So I think the French government needs to step up, as well as the American government, as well as all nations of the world. I mentioned that Cuba, you don't hear anything about the American media saying that Cubans are helping Haiti. From the very moment of the earthquake, Cuban doctors rushed to Haiti. But this is, again, the mainstream press does not report the truth about what is going on in Haiti. So Bobby is right. There's a lot of hatred that the United States has done. I remember when President Aristide was there, the United States came in and swooped Aristide out and took him to Africa against his will. So I think that, the domination of all the Caribbean by these colonial powers or post-colonial powers is something that we need to address. But right now, the immediate issue in Haiti is relief.
Yep. We
need our love. Because I think Bob is right. Love has to be translated concretely into relief, into economics. There was a lot of money that poured into Haiti after the last earthquake, but it didn't really get to the Haitian people.
Exactly.
And this is what we have to focus on today.
Yeah, and Dr. Chavis, I also wanted to mention Dina Santos's comment about what you had mentioned in Afghanistan. She says, right on, Dr. Ben, Warfare 101, and losing war for 20 years. That's why the U.S. left. And on that note, the president also made it a point to say that this was really the scenes that are coming out of Afghanistan. We've seen folks on air, hanging on to U.S. aircrafts, flying up in the air, and some unfortunately falling to their death. But the president said that it was gut-wrenching, particularly for veterans and those who lost loved ones in that 20-year fight in Afghanistan. And he says, how many more headstones at Arlington National Cemetery do we want? He just wanted to pull out. It was time to pull out, and he certainly did that. I want to move on, Dr. Chavis and James Wright. Thanks again, James. We really appreciate your insight. And I want to move on to another news topic, one that may have escaped many, But more than 9 years ago, we know that the world lost tragically Whitney Houston. She died in the bathroom of a California hotel. With a voice for the ages, the superstar left a cavalcade of hits, including the iconic I Will Always Love You, first performed by Dolly Parton in 1972. Well, the country music icon is reaping millions upon millions from that song because it is her song and she's getting royalties. But guess what she's doing with it? Well, Dolly Parton is honoring Whitney Houston in the most unique way. She has used the reported more than $10 million she's made in royalties from the hit record to invest in an office complex that sits in a predominantly Black neighborhood in Nashville, Tennessee. Dolly Parton said it was mostly just Black families and people that lived around there that she wanted to help. She says that it was a whole strip mall, and I thought, this is the perfect place for me to be, considering it was Whitney. Of course, Whitney Houston, a multi-Grammy winner, covered I Will Always Love You for the 1992 blockbuster film The Bodyguard, in which she co-starred along with Kevin Costner. Dolly Parton wrote the song in 1972, and while she didn't specify which mall she invested in, she said she wanted to figure out the best way to honor Whitney Houston, who brought global acclaim to that song. She says, I just thought this was great. I'm going to be down there with her people, who are my people as well. And so I just love the fact that I spent that money on a complex, and I think this is the house that Whitney built. What a tribute, Dr. Chavis and James, from Dolly Parton to Whitney Houston.
It is a great tribute and shows you that the legacy of our dear beloved sister, may she rest in peace, Whitney Houston, her legacy still lives. Her talent, her not only her voice, you know, when Whitney Houston sang, you could feel an immediate uplift. And so we thank Dolly Parton for not only remembering and acknowledging better that the wealth of that song that was created was because of the genius, the artistic genius of Whitney Houston.
Yeah, and James, I know that you have covered a lot of topics. I know entertainment it has to be among them with your distinguished career. I want to get your thoughts on that as well.
Well, a lot of people don't know this, Stacey, but Dolly Parton has been a covert supporter of Black causes. You know, she has that program where she reads to young people. For the majority of the young people she reads to are African American. Also, she has supported, particularly in that area of African American causes. She doesn't broadcast that. The thing about it is she doesn't broadcast it to the world, but she does that. And you know, it's funny we're talking about Dolly Parton, but because, correct me if I'm wrong, the best rendition of our national anthem was sung, I believe, by Whitney Houston, in terms of about a few decades ago, if I'm correct. So the two kind of mesh. So it doesn't surprise me, but I'm very happy about what Dolly Parton is doing for the African American neighborhood in the Nashville area.
Yeah, and James, many people do consider that version at the Super Bowl by Whitney Houston the best rendition of the national anthem. Now, I consider the best rendition to be Marvin Gaye's 1982 rendition at the NBA All-Star game in Los Angeles. That's the one that, look, you talk about soul. Marvin Gaye was, you know what? He was born from soul. He had soul running through his veins. And Dr. Chavis, you know that. And that rendition, if you go back, James, I think, and you put the two together, it'd be hard not to choose Marvin. I know it's hard not to choose Whitney, but as Bobby Henry says, Whitney and Marvin Gaye, what a combination, what history right there. And both cases gone way too soon.
Yeah. Well, again, but the impact of their voices, both Whitney Houston, Marvin Gaye, I will go back to Mahalia Jackson when she sang Precious Lord. I think that, and we can't leave out Aretha Franklin. And I know there's a movie out about her life now starring Jennifer Hudson. We're just a blessed people. And part of the blessing that people of African descent must always acknowledge were those sheroes and those heroes that stand up in our midst and not only sing like birds, but they give out a rendition that helps breaks the shackles of oppression. It helps breaks the shackles of racial discrimination. Makes us proud as a people.
And Dr. Chavis, Norman, our news director, our producer of this show, he writes in that he says, don't forget Ray Charles singing singing "America the Beautiful" before the Leonard Duran fight. We had Sugar Ray Leonard on the program, and Sugar Ray talked about that being a motivator for him, humiliating, not just beating, but humiliating Roberto Duran. He said, Ray Charles, after singing that song, first of all, there was no way he was going to lose after hearing his namesake, because Ray is named Ray Charles Leonard right after Ray Charles. And he said Ray Charles walked up to him after singing and said, "Kick his behind." He didn't use the word behind, but it's a family show. So, Gregory Muhammad says that Marvin Gaye set the tone for many others who are to excel and become better, constantly elevating. And certainly don't want to understate Ray Charles, because we remember that so well. They were in New Orleans, and that was in 1982, I believe. It was 1982. Well, it could have been a little sooner, but anyway, we don't want to understate Ray Charles. Dr. Chavis, you're going to have a thought there?
Yeah, I just want to say that all the names that we've mentioned today were strong supporters of the civil rights movement, were strong supporters of the freedom struggle of Black Americans and other communities of color, not only in the United States, but throughout the world. And I just want to say, remember when Marvin Gaye did, what's going on, it was during the height of the Vietnam War. And he raised questions about the injustice that's going on in Vietnam. And we must raise these same questions now about Afghanistan. We must raise these same questions about Haiti. We must maintain these questions of still. Look at Africa today, a continent with such great promise, but also policies, foreign policies by America, foreign policies by the British, foreign policies by the Portuguese, by the French, by the Spanish, have not been in the interest of our people. So if there was ever a time where people of African descent should be uniting, it is now.
Yeah, absolutely. And again, we thank you so much, James Wright, for lending your expertise this morning. Dr. Chavis, it's always a privilege to sit with you, the icon that you are, and our fearless leader of the National Newspaper Publicists Association. It's a privilege every morning on Let It Be Known. And please remember this. We can't stress this enough. This will never get old as long as we have this pandemic. Wear a mask, social distance, and please strongly consider vaccination. We can beat this pandemic, certainly in the Black community. Let's do what's right. We have so many pre-existing conditions, and many it's not our fault. But don't let COVID take us out. Wear a mask, social distance, get vaccinated if you can, and join us tomorrow morning, and we will have another program in which we will tell you again, please get vaccinated. Everybody, stay safe, stay well, and we will see you tomorrow.